Hey, man.
Hey.
How you doing?
Good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. I really appreciate you doing this with me.
It's good to see you looking so relaxed with the very fashionable black t-shirt, and we just talked about your white Stan Smiths. Very impressive.
You were asking me whether or not I care whether they get dirty. This is the first pair of white shoes, and they're like, everyone has white shoes, and I'm like the last guy to the party, so I just don't have time to clean the shoes. But
well, it's very appropriate for what we're going to talk about because those are flat shoes. So if you're going to go running, those are the shoes you would run with, and you would never think about that, would you?
No.
See?
So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. You are the CEO of American Barbell. You've been in the fitness industry for so many years and really an expert and a leader in the space, a thought leader in the space. So I'm really excited to talk mostly about health and nutrition and fitness, but also about business and strategy because you have a beautiful harmony of both of those worlds. Selfishly speaking, as somebody who, one of the rich pillars is health and nutrition. And so selfishly speaking, I really wanted to talk about health and fitness and exercise and hacks, and not only for myself, but obviously the audience as well. So I'm really excited to get into this with you today. Yeah.
I'm not so sure that's going to work well because I've only been fighting this battle for like 25, 30 years, and it's always been, I always say that fitness I didn't choose it chose me. Like I never chose to be a coach. It chose me. I was an athlete my whole life, a baseball player, football player, basketball player. I just gravitated to athletics and I had that kind of that innate ability to perform at those sports really well. And then I became a cyclist, and that changed everything because I was competing against guys that were a little wispy 135-pound Colombian climber going up a hill, and here I was at 155, 165 pounds, which is heavy for a cyclist, and I had to figure something out, right? But I knew biomechanically how the body worked. I knew from a nutrition perspective what I needed to do, but I didn't want to sacrifice weight training. And weight training really was the answer to my success as a cyclist. And I started to think, and I thought, wait a second. If you combine those things, strength training is such a valuable part of who we are as athletes and everything else. And really, I was riding half the amount of miles as everybody else, but I was strength training. I was recovering faster. I became a great stage racer, a Cat 2 rider, 2-time state champion. And it was all because of the strength training. It wasn't because of the bike training.
Yeah.
So the light bulb started to go off, and that's what kind of created the whole process. I was probably one of the first true I went from a cyclist, endurance guy to an Olympic lifter. Right? And
totally different worlds.
But they complemented one another.
You are founder of Natural, NTRL. Talk to us about what that is and tell us about the framework of Natural.
Yeah. Over the last 20, 25 years, myself and I have a lot of coaches that work for us as well. Are you helping me out there? Thanks.
Yeah, you're good.
You done this before?
Yes.
All right, good.
You're good.
Natural is it's an amalgamation and a melting pot and a blend of academia, science, practical experience, both as an educator, coach, and a business person, and really kind of like learning. You can't be out of balance until you know what it's like to be in balance, and vice versa. So I've kind of combined all that. We started out as a big education company a while back. I worked for a very well-known subject matter expert group, and since then, things started to just pop up, and I found that I was always that contrarian. I was always the guy that did so much extra research and really looked at the science behind why people were talking about things in the fitness industry, and I kind of made a really good living on that, running shoes being one of them, right? So Natural is nutrition, training, recovery, and life, and it's kind of, you have your 4-pillar approach, that's ours, and what we've done is taken continuing education for the fitness industry, and now branched out to business leaders, businesses. I was just on the phone with Brad Brimhall, head of Semper Fit for the Marines in Quantico yesterday. The Army came to visit me. The head colonel for the Army came out and saw us in Las Vegas last week to talk about their new approach, which is very holistic. It's really interesting to see what the Army and the Marines are doing now. It's really cool. And it just so happened that the stars aligned with what we're doing on the education side. It started out as an equipment discussion. And with both of them, it was like, no, we're missing something here. Here's the missing piece. It's the holistic, it's the natural approach. So underneath each one of those, it's an acronym of Natural. And the website, in fact, I will announce it for the first time right here. Ready? Breaking.
Let's do it.
Breaking.
Drop it.
LIVENTRL, NTRL.com is live today. It's a splash page that we just put up because the content's coming behind it. So we're pretty stoked about that. Myself and marketing director Julius Chu, amazing guy, Julius Chu, been with me a long time. So yeah, we're pretty stoked about it. And it kind of combines, everything that I've been doing for the last 20, 25 years. And it's just, awesome. It's a passion and it's fun.
Well, that's really clear when I talk to you, and I've known you for a few years, and we know each other from the business world, but you have this such a depth of knowledge in nutrition and health, and I love how you've really encompassed all this stuff in a very holistic approach. Let's get into tell me about what does natural health and natural fitness really mean? What are we talking about here?
So the reason we chose that acronym was we believe in a very fitness truthful approach, meaning you're not going to get gimmicks, you're not going to get smoke and mirrors. We're going to make decisions and program and make decisions on our nutrition programs based on science, right? Like I said, it's a blend of science, academia, and real world athletics. It's everybody's an athlete in my eyes. Everybody's an athlete. They may not want to accept that.
Yeah.
But you are, because you're trying to compete in something. You're trying to reclaim athleticism for what you did back in high school maybe. But I think a lot of people, when you look at, I have a lot of friends that are in my age bracket, over 45, 50-ish, right? And they've lost it. They've lost that vitality, that spark, that athleticism. But when I talk about it, their ears, they perk up. And they go, "What do you mean, Doug? You're still surfing and you skateboard?" When I go to trade shows, everybody's like, "Doug, where's your skateboard?" I'm skateboarding everywhere, right? I'm over 50 and I'm skateboarding everywhere. So, and I surf and I train and I live natural to do that stuff, right? So it's really important, I think, that we're providing that truth to people. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there. At American Barbell, the founder, Phil Patty, and I, that's why we're successful. We're the biggest, probably the best well-known secret of OEM in the industry. We supply all the product for Planet Fitness and Orange Theory and some other well-known brands, but it's because we make the best product in the world because we actually use it, right? We manufacture it ourselves. We actually care about it. So that kind of, those two things have blended together really, really well. And the natural platform, and we've been doing certification education for, 20 years. And, now is the time to kind of step it up a little bit. And it's a coming out party, if you will.
That's awesome. As a triathlete, I don't do a lot of weightlifting.
Wait, when did you start doing triathlons?
Probably 2016. Why? Well, I've been a runner since I was in high school, and never really thought about biking or swimming, or like an athlete. But I was sort of bored of only running, and I felt like I needed more opportunity or more options. And so somebody was doing, I can't remember who it was, but somebody was doing an Ironman, and I was like, I want to do that. And I don't know if I was just gravitated out of jealousy or if that guy can do it, I can do it. And I got into the sport. I bought a really inexpensive bike. I didn't have any coaching, and I just started cycling and swimming. I was already a bad runner, but I was a runner. And then I did a couple of sprints. I did a bunch of Olympics. And then I started to train for a half Ironman, and I hired a coach. And when I hired a coach, everything changed. And so actually I'm going to take that into this conversation, because one of the things we talked before we started recording was, how do you create training plans for you? And everybody's body and biomechanics and everything is really different. So I think that I learned very specifically that I was training incorrectly, both running and swimming and biking, for probably 15 or 20 years, completely incorrectly, because no one really taught me how to do it properly. And we're talking about heart rate management and, momentum and movement and steps and all that stuff. And so
do you want to do it?
Form.
Do you want to go full Ironman, or are you just dabbling?
I'm probably going to do a full Ironman, but that's a little intense. So I'll do a handful more of halves, and I love the triathlons. I love them. But the reason why I want to talk about this with you is because I never really was a strength trainer. Never really got into strength. I was never a gym rat. I never could get in. I told people I'd rather go run 15 miles than spend 45 minutes in the gym lifting weights. And what I realized was actually the strength training made me a better runner, swimmer, and biker.
It also helps in recovery. So
Yeah, so let's talk
is
about
what people
that.
don't understand, because especially as an endurance athlete. So when I was cycling a lot, I used to, and I remember, gosh, it was probably a dozen years ago. I used to go out with a friend to the desert, and there was a century ride out there, 100 miles or so. And one of the years we did it, it was brutally windy. It was nasty. I remember starting out at 7 a.m, downtown Palm Springs, and we got to roll out, and there was like 50-mile-an-hour crosswinds. And usually on a century, the faster guys get to the front. So we were at the front. It was all breaking up. Anyway, it was just a nasty, vicious, ugly day. While I was battling the winds and people were flying all over the place, of course, because I was a little bit heavier than all the other little wispy guys, I had so much more stability on my bike. Like my midline, most people would say core, we say midline, there's a reason behind that, really got me through. That afternoon, when my buddies were texting me, oh, I'm so wrecked, I'm trashed, right? I need a margarita. I went into the weight room, did my GHD work, did some kettlebell swings, did some posterior chain work. The next day I went out and rode 50, 60, up 74, felt great. So if you know how to program that, now there's adaptation and things that occur, that will make you a better triathlete, because everybody's going to do what you're doing, and train the same way, go in the same. You got to be
mileage.
Yeah, because that's what the industry has told you. You need to look outside the industry to see what actually works. And then the other thing is it's, how many of your viewers also want to be strong, right? So musculature picks you up. Without muscle, you're a bag of bones.
Yeah.
And position is everything. So that is determined in the weight room. If how you look on the bike or how you run or how you swim is largely positional. Position creates power. And so we talk a lot about that in our programming. So there's some cornerstones underneath the whole training component that relate to what you're talking about. And I think endurance athletes do not pay enough attention to strength training. And usually endurance athletes will say, oh, I need strength training so I can run faster. No. It's also recovery. It's also to learn how to adapt to proper position. Because generally when you're on the bike, for most people, your position may suffer. Not your posture, your position. So we talk a lot about that. And it's even sitting down. It's
absolutely.
All that, that's why it bleeds into the recovery, because you may train hard and do everything else, but if you're not recovering properly, if you're not sitting or standing in line at Starbucks the right way, you got a problem.
One of the things I learned really early on was how important muscle activation was. And in biking, running, and swimming, there's a lot of muscles that never get activated. And so by strength training, you can actually activate muscles intentionally that you're not activating in other exercises that most people do, which gives you more endurance, more strength. And then the second thing I realized, which again, most endurance athletes never even focus on strength training, is that the fatigue comes from a lack of strength. It doesn't actually come, and I'd love you to tell me whether I'm right or wrong, but like what I experienced was my muscles were tired because I didn't put enough strength in them pre-training. I just ran them long, if that makes any sense.
There's a scientific principle called the SAID principle, specific adaptations to imposed demands. So whatever demand you place on your body, that's how it's going to respond and adapt. I was in a lot of bike races. Here's what I learned. It took me about 12 years of competing seriously to learn something. A race rarely, and I did a lot of 5Ks, a race rarely comes down to who's more aerobically fit.
No.
It's who can attack, who can be aggressive, who can play offense, and then recover and do it again and again and again and again. Watch the Tour de France. So watch the Ironman when they're in Kona and they're flying and there's wind and all kinds of stuff. It's you get that final lead pack of people. It's who can attack and break. That's where it really boils down to. And if you don't train that and those things happen in a competition, you're screwed.
And that comes from strength.
And a lot of that comes from strength, right? And there's other things, and you could talk a lot about nutrition and recovery and all that. But yeah,
let's talk about
that
recovery.
Strength and power, especially with triathletes, because it's a very difficult sport. So I commend you on doing that. By the way, did you shave your legs yet?
No, I'm not that kind of triathlete. Look at you.
You got to shave them.
No, I'm not that kind of triathlete.
Really?
Not yet.
You want to shave?
Not that I don't
shave them on the podcast. That'd be kind of cool.
Not that I wouldn't do it, but I just haven't thought about it. Maybe I'm not that.
There's only two types of cyclists: those who crash, and those who will.
Yeah.
So it's coming. Go ahead. Sorry.
I want to talk about recovery, because I think a lot of people on the podcast are, high performers, want to get a lot of stuff done. They bring in exercise and fitness into their routine. If you're somebody who works out 5-6 days a week, recovery is an important part of that, staying on that routine without crashing and burning. Whether you're strength training or doing triathlons or cardio, what are your recommendations in terms of recovery?
I think recovery, you'll read a lot of articles and smoke and mirror stuff and blogs that'll say, get your 7 or 8 hours of sleep.
Yep.
And recovery, foam roll, and do this. Look, man, sleep and recovery are the same thing. If recovery happens the second you stop training, right now you're recovering.
Yeah.
There's 168 hours in a week. Elite athletes, think about this, if you train 10% of that time, that's almost 17 hours, you'll be a freaking elite athlete, right? Yeah. Think about how many hours, just in the back of your mind right now, how many hours do you train? And triathletes are even more difficult because the recovery piece is critical. So it's what you do when you're not training that counts with recovery. Has nothing, and I got a question. I was on an airplane coming back from San Antonio 2 weeks ago from this athletic business show. A guy sitting next to me saw my American barbell shirt and he goes, hey, I'm going to talk to me about training. And he goes, yeah, he was like in his mid 30s. I'm like, dude, he's like, I feel like I'm overtrained all the time, And I said, well, I don't think you're overtrained. I think you're under recovered. The body adapts really quickly. So as a triathlete, if you're training properly, you're going to be doing more than one workout a day many times, right? Yep. In fact, all athletes, if you want to, here's a great quick fix for you. If you want to get fit quick and cause your body to adapt, mix in 2 double sessions during the week. Watch what happens.
2 double sessions.
2 double sessions.
Two a day.
You hit it in the morning. You hit it in the afternoon. This morning I went out for my 2.5 mile run around the lake in Lake Forest. This afternoon it's going to be deadlift, bench press, and some accessory work. Right? So I do that 2 to 3 days a week and I feel great, right? Wow. It also causes you to be a little bit more cognizant and aware of what you're putting in your body, how you're recovering throughout your day. So I think about the recovery piece is when I'm sitting working in my computer, I'm standing up a lot. I'm being aware of my position, my shoulders and everything, especially for triathletes or endurance athletes in general, right? They generally don't translate that. They stop training and they stop thinking about it.
Right.
And then you can certainly gauge your sleep, and there's a lot of apps and stuff for that. But look, man, you should be awake. Don't worry about how many hours. Don't stress about that. How do you feel when you wake up in the morning? Because a lot of that also depends upon what you ate for dinner post-training. What time did you go to bed? Did you have any alcohol? Those are all the things that you gotta kind of weigh in. So when we talk to athletes, and we program for tons of athletes, when we program for an athlete, we don't do the typical, well, here's our training program and follow this for 6 weeks. And it's no. Each one of us is different. Biochemical.
Let's talk about that.
Biochemical individuality. So I know you run a successful company. You have a great podcast emerging for sure. But if I was to coach you, I'm not just going to be your typical coach or trainer that's going to say, can you tell me about your goals and what do you want to accomplish? No, I want to know who you are, how old you are, what's your lifestyle like, what's your circadian rhythm like, how much do you sleep? I want to know what's your experience in fitness and athletics. How do you feel about it? Give me an assessment of what you think your strengths are and your weaknesses are, and give me some data. I want data because I want to know VO2 or I want to know resting heart rate or and if you don't know those things, that already tells me a lot about who you are as an athlete.
Right.
And then I'm going to give you a couple of tests, right? I'm going to say, okay, let me see what you can, if you're a triathlete, I'm going to see your 2 mile time, not your 1 mile time. I want to see your 2 mile time. I want to see what you can deadlift because that's your posterior chain. That's going to make you run faster and keep you upright, right? And most endurance athletes focus on the anterior part of the body, not the posterior. It's the stuff, and this is for everybody in general, by the way. Most people work on the muscles when you look at yourself in the mirror that you can see. Work on the stuff you can't see. It's your back, it's your shoulders, it's your lower back, it's your butt, it's your hamstrings, it's your calves. That's the stuff that's going to help keep you upright. And I think people miss that. Great runners have great butts.
It's true.
Look around. It's true. Look around and see how many, if you see somebody walking on the street.
That's going to be the title of this podcast.
I'm telling you, man. But no, check this out. If show me somebody with a flat butt, I'll show you a weak athlete or a weak person. If you're not working the posterior chain group, you're making a big mistake. And it also helps you. And it's also, by the way, not bad. It's almost, I think deadlifting is one of the most quintessential, most fundamental movements the human body, because you're picking stuff up off the floor. And you'll hear some people, I got a bad back. Well, then, dude, you should be deadlifting. people do the opposite of what they think.
Yeah, that's right.
My shoulders hurt. Well, then I'm going to design a shoulder program
because the body will adapt to that resistance. So what we're trained to think is, don't lift heavy weights, you'll hurt your back. But actually, the back will adapt to that heavy weight.
So you're exactly right. Remember I said specific adaptation to imposed demands. A 65-pound deadlift can hurt you just as bad as a 465-pound deadlift. Now, let me tell you why. If I can teach you good position on, if I taught you how to deadlift properly, and your form's good, and your technique is good, because skill and technique are the priority, then intensity, then volume. Most triathletes flip it the other way.
True.
They do too much volume up front with not enough knowledge about intensity. Then skill and technique is, You mean if I want to start running, I can just put a pair of running shoes on and go run? No. That would be like if you've never driven before, I just give you keys and go drive my car.
Well, that's how most people are trained. But that's how most people get into most athletics.
If they're uninformed. Yeah. Right. So I think, again, I said position, skill and technique is critical. So the worst thing that's going to happen to you in that 460, maybe you can deadlift 465. I don't know. You look pretty strong. But if you couldn't, the worst thing that's going to happen is you just can't lift it. If I put you in a good position, the weight's not going to hurt you. Weights or heavy lifting or intensity doesn't hurt people. People hurt people, right? So I've been doing this for a long time, and you're going to get injured. It's going to happen at some point. It's inevitable. But how do you respond and recover from that injury will tell me a lot about you as well, right? So that's why I think the whole skill and tech, when we do a really cool 2-day live high intensity interval training certification for the industry. And that's one of my first slides is, here's the mantra: skill and technique, then intensity, then volume.
Yeah, I mean, when I was training for my Ironman, that was probably one thing that I was taught that I never really thought about. That we're gonna run incredibly slow, but we're gonna run right. We're gonna bike incredibly slow, but we're gonna bike right. We're gonna learn how to swim incredibly slow, but we're gonna focus on form and technique. And then you just layer on more time, more speed, and you get faster and more aggressive, and you have more power, and it just becomes more natural. But most people are like, all right, we're just gonna go run 20 miles, and we're just gonna power through it because we have the mind strength to be able to power through it. That's when we get injured. We lack strength, we lack form, we lack technique.
Well, especially with something like running, because when I did my morning run this morning, I'm one of those, I never stop doing this, right? So I'm always analyzing and watching people walk and run and, drive my wife crazy because she'll be like, why are you watching that person stand in line at Whole Foods? I'm like, look how they're leaning, and they're going to have a back problem in a few months, and the knee problem, the knees are caving in, and then their arches are flat. That's a problem, and all these other things. But running's the classic example because when running shoes came out, running injuries went up. That was because it encouraged people to land on the ground, on the earth, with improper position, with a lack of skill and technique acumen, and it's critical. So the whole shoe thing, and it was a money play, okay? It was, and certain companies made a ton of money on running shoes because they made this big cushy running shoe that encouraged you to land on your heel, which is one of the worst places you can land. That ground reaction force, I don't care if you're on grass or anything, that's just going to go straight up into your knee and your hip and your low back. That's why a lot of runners are injured, or they end up running too slow. In fact, the slower you run, the more susceptible you are to injury. True. Right? Yep. So we teach a lot of running mechanics, and we basically, and it's not rocket science, but it is science. We teach ground reaction force, and a lot of what we do on running is the same that we do when we're teaching weight training or movement. We're teaching coaches and people physics. I always say, I say it at the beginning, I'm going to teach everybody physics this weekend. If you can learn how to put yourself within proper lines and in proper position in relationship to the load, you're going to be in pretty good shape. And everyone's mechanics are different. Their biomechanics are different. That's right. Right? In cycling, like everyone's positioning and the size of their bikes, and people don't really think about that at the amateur level. Once you start getting more invested in the sport, everyone is like micro-millimeter adjustments based on the biomechanics of their body and how that was when I was a cyclist. That was the other thing is I sought out. I had a great coach in Costa Mesa. Her name was Eileen Olson. Shout out to Eileen. She's amazing. She every coach needs a coach. Yes. And I love that. She one of the things I learned from her was how to really break down lever length according to the individual and according to the geometry of the bike. Now, as a road cyclist, my geometry is different than a triathlete's bike, obviously, because you got to save your hamstrings for the run and all that sort of the good thing. So she really taught me that, right? And that's, again, that was like one of the other light bulbs that went off, is that has so much application to the weight room as well, right? So that, you know, and for those guys at that level, Tour de France or high level Ironman guys, you know, a 1 or 2% power output differential could mean the difference between first and 30th, meaning you make less money. So that's a big deal. But yeah, running is, you know, we're our group of coaches, we're big believers in, because of the skill and technique mantra, we really look at, well, what does the body do when your foot hits the ground, right? We have this approach with everything we do. We try to keep it really simple because we're involved in so many sectors of the fitness and athletic industry. We just call it ground up analysis. So as a coach, we're looking from the ground up what happens. In other words, if I'm in the weight room and I'm watching somebody push press or strict press, I'm looking at their feet first. If I can't set you up in a good position, then everything that happens upstream is going to be a problem. Same thing on the bike. I'm going to watch your points of contact, your feet into the pedals. Is that right? Because if that's not right, everything else that happens ain't going to be good. So that's how we look at
a good approach.
Yeah. So that's how we look at running too. Yeah.
Let's talk about the heart. I think that when people think about extreme athletics or fitness or nutrition, they're not just thinking about performance, but they're thinking about longevity, right? So you're working your body because you want it to work for you longer. You want to be able to have a healthy lifestyle when you're 70, 80 years old and be strong and be mobile, etc., what have you. But the heart is such an important component of that. Tell me what we should be thinking about when it comes to the heart, both in strength and longevity.
The heart's a muscle, right? So it's going to adapt to what type of demand you put on it as well. So again, this is why long, slow duration stuff doesn't work. It works if you're happy being mediocre or less than mediocre, good, right? But you need to, that's why we're big believers also in changing up heart rate intensity. It also tells me a lot about how you're going to react, both from a recovery standpoint and from a muscular standpoint. As soon as I start taking you into that anaerobic threshold, above that 80, 82% number, that's going to tell me a lot about how you are as an athlete and what I need to work on. So yeah, we're big believers in changing that up a lot. There's a great, you know, I do it all the time myself.
So we're talking about high intensity interval training, getting the heart rate as high as we can for a short amount of time with short amounts of recovery, and then over and over and over. So pushing the boundaries of the...
and again, it's a little contrarian again. So the intervals are a really important part of your training, because if you're in a competition, it's never going to be like, hey, everybody, can we just go this speed for a while?
That's right.
No, that's not going to happen.
Everybody stay in zone 2 for 45 minutes. Yeah,
it doesn't work, right? And zones are really ambiguous too. So we try to keep it simple. Aerobic, anaerobic, that's it.
Okay.
Let's find that number. What happens when you switch over? And then let's train you on some of those more intense days just over so you can sustain it for a longer period of time, because that's what happens in a race. And then let's also develop your aerobic system. So capillary production, all that sort of good stuff we learned about. But you got to do both. And it also changes what type of fuel system your body's accessing as well. So, and again, that's good because now that trickles over into the nutrition piece. So it's really important, but you have to measure that. And what I would encourage, and what we do encourage, is get yourself a heart rate monitor, get an app. Don't get too freaked out about the zones. Don't overstress about it. Start tracking your heart rate in response to certain demands, i.e. intensity and everything else. The interval piece is really important, and I think it's largely misunderstood. When we do a lot of seminars and we say the word interval, I always ask everybody in the room, I say, well, what comes to mind? If I say interval to you, what do you think about? Like if I said, Ash, you did an interval, like what words come to mind?
I think about short. I think about like 30 to 60 seconds, fast and hard.
Okay. Good. That's 50% of it. But intervals are also done subanaerobic. So you should be doing aerobic intervals as well. And the other missing piece to this is, how are you recovering from the intervals? So you should be doing aerobic intervals, not just anaerobic or intense intervals. And I think a lot of people think interval.
So give me an example.
You're out on your bike, and I'm going to have you do 3 sets of 2 and 2, 2 minutes at 70 to 75%-ish, pending how you feel. Some days you're going to feel better than others. I'm going to give you that range as a coach. I'm not going to pinpoint you, because every day is going to be a little bit different. Temperature, what you ate, how you feel, what your wife said to you last night. So all that sort of stuff has to factor in. Aerobic, here's a basic other solution. So anaerobic threshold, the time from your body from aerobic to anaerobic metabolism. Sub-AT, aerobic intervals, 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. So mix those in, 1 minute to 10 minutes. So if I give you something for 5 minutes, you're going to rest for 5 minutes. If I give you something for 10 minutes, you rest for 10. If it's anaerobic or it's intense, then it's a 1-to-3. Simple rule of thumb. Now, as we would get far,
one of the intervals.
However long the interval is on aerobic, you're resting the same amount of time. On the anaerobic cycle, it's a triple. So if I give you a hard effort at 20 seconds, 60-second recovery. If I give you a hard effort for 2 minutes, yes, it's 6 minutes recovery. And most amateur athletes will be like, oh my gosh, that's so much rest. I must be not helping myself. No, you are helping yourself. If you watch great track athletes. So,
what's happening in the body when you do that? Like, finish your story and then tell me.
So, when I did my undergrad work at USC, right? Tough year for football, though, man. Rough. And I remember walking back and forth from the baseball field back to the locker room. At that time, the USC track team was really good. And I noticed that the 200-meter runners and the 400-meter runners, when they would do a hard interval, they were going about 1-to-3, 1-to-4. And again, this kind of stuck in my mind, right? And I'm thinking, okay, that makes sense. And then I started learning about what Usain Bolt was doing. He was doing about a 1-to-5, right? So if he did a hard 1 minute effort, he may rest 8 minutes in between. I think it worked out pretty well for him. So I think those are the things that people undervalue and underestimate, is that your body's, because you want to be able to hit that next hard interval feeling fantastic at 100%, versus if you didn't rest as long, instead of realizing that 100% capacity, maybe now you're at 80 or 85%. Now you've just left 10% on the table. Well, that's a big difference, right? And I'm more interested, you're training, you're not competing. To train, you want to adapt. And if you're going to adapt to higher intensity efforts, give yourself a break, which is also not as stressful. Watch your heart rate. I did it this morning, and I'm watching my heart rate, and I knew in my intervals when I start to go up Geronimo Road that it's a little bit of an incline. I'm like, oh man, I better watch it. I can't do my next interval until I know I drop into my blue, which is my 60%. So those are the things so does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Why? I've always wondered this. Why does our metabolism become slower as we get older?
Because we let it.
Tell me about that.
Well, Dr. Rob Wildman, who's a good friend of mine, who was the former chief science officer at Dymatize, very, very popular protein blend. He's in his early 50s, like I am, and we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago in Dallas. I spent October, I think I was in town like 9 days. I was at Dallas, and then we took a little break in Sedona, and then I went back out to San Antonio. So I met Dr. Rob in Dallas, and we were talking about this very subject. And we said, it's a muscle thing, right? The more muscle you have, the more active your metabolism is, okay?
I agree with that.
Skeletal muscle is everything. Remember I said earlier, without muscle, you're a bag of bones, right? If you don't have proper musculature alignment, that's when things go bad in your body. You'll leak energy somewhere. You're going to put too much pressure on a certain joint. That's when bad things start to happen. That's also if you have poor posture or position, that inhibits metabolism. So there's a lot of things that are related to that. But it's muscularity. So the wind up there is skeletal muscle. So here's what I tell everybody. Make sure you are strength training with enough load, meaning enough weight. That's going to help keep muscle on you, which keeps your metabolism really active. Combine that with a well-balanced training program on a weekly basis, not more than a week, because life changes in a week. So when we program for people, it's a week at a time. It's a week at a time, because last time I checked, you might get sick, something might happen, you might have a couple bottles of wine with some friends, you might not feel so hot, you got less sleep. Your program should be willing to undulate and change with that. So the skeletal muscle piece, to answer your question, is critical for metabolic success over a long period of time. And as people grow older, they typically will err to lifting lighter weight and doing more quote unquote cardio work, right? So cardio, it's easier, right?
It's easier. I'm burning more fat, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of
Actually, a big myth.
There's a couple of terms, and cardio is another one, and we focus more on stamina training. I'm more interested in what you can tolerate at a higher heart rate than what you can go out and do, walking on a treadmill for 40 minutes at, 4 miles an hour with a 2% incline. I
think that's a huge myth that people need to realize, that running more and biking more does not lose weight. It really doesn't. Well, you could probably lose weight and get fitter if you just do 1 or 2 more strength training days than you do.
And you said it earlier, drives me nuts when I watch people run and bike slow all the time. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what's the point? What's the point? You're putting off the inevitable. Why not save a little time and go a little bit harder? I'm not saying go intense all the time, because you do need those easier days and those harder days and those medium range days. But that's why, and you'll see, again, you'll see runners or cyclists that look at their bodies. Those are the ones that are a little bit softer, a little bit more overweight, right? And it's not all. I'm sure nutrition plays a role there, but your body wants to respond to higher intent. That's how your body adapts quicker. Right. And it's kind of why, I wrote a blog a while back and I said, I don't think we have an obesity problem. I think we have a slow-besity problem. I think people are doing stuff too freaking slow. Like, I don't know about you, but I travel a lot. I go through airports. I feel like I'm in a slalom course going between people, right? Because you got people that are looking like they got shot in the knees and the shoulders and, yeah.
Let's talk about routine, because I think, and you just hit it, because, you travel a lot. You're the CEO of a fast-growing 8-figure company, or 9 figures. I don't even know, but I know you're at least 8 figures. We're getting up there. You, during COVID, you pivoted to online with American Barbell. So you not only are selling through distribution, but you're also doing online. You're based here in Southern California. Headquarters is in Vegas. You're a nationally recognized fitness expert. You got 2 little kids, one on the way. Or one no,
she's
brand new.
She's baby Elle is now 5 months old.
Yeah, so
and my
2
daughter's
little
3.
babies.
We saw you at
exactly
the Spectrum over there. We were running. Yeah, that was
so
great.
we're young dads.
We are
with young babies. You're running you're running a business. Tell me about the routine that helps you maintain that level of success.
Smart question. I should ask you the same question too, because I know you do a really good job of it. And I commend you on that, by the way.
Thank you.
One of the things that attracted, I think, when we were in our group together was you always brought the same energy with a very calm, positive, humble demeanor. And I think that's important for leaders.
Appreciate that.
I think leaders need more of that. I think all of us do, right? I mean, you only get one shot at this thing called life. And I want to leave an imprint and leave some legacy and make sure my kids are well taken care of and serve as many people as I can, right? So routine.
Love that.
I don't know if it's as much a routine, right? I think I said to you before.
What do you build in, right? What are
I think, again,
what are the ingredients?
It's part of the natural thing again, but I think I was talking to my wife about this the other day, and I honestly have not woken up a day in the last 25 years not wanting to work. I don't call this work. Like,
yes.
I pursued what I wanted to pursue, and now, you're doing what you're doing with this podcast, which is amazing. So I make sure that in the morning, for me, I need that sense of peace and calm to collect my day. So I'll wake up 5 a.m., between 5 and 6 a.m., depending upon what's going on. Really good cup of hand-poured coffee. I love that hand-poured coffee, good dark roast coffee. Usually my sidekick, Hobo, my cat, who thinks he's a dog or a human. He always barks if I don't feed him fast enough. He'll jump up on the counter with me, and then my Great Pyrenees dog, Sally, that's about that big, about 100 pounds, comes waltzing into the kitchen, and the 3 of us just hang out.
Nice.
Right? And I might read a little bit, but I don't jump into work. I don't look at my emails. I don't.
Slow mornings.
Yeah, because for me, I need to find a little bit of that peace because my life is pretty busy in a good way, but I choose that.
Yeah.
I think everybody, and we all have a choice to be busy or not, or productive or not, right? I do it because I sincerely, humbly enjoy it, and I want to see people successful. One of the things I said to you earlier, I think you take care of yourself. Not one word yourself, yourself. And I think I think we all have to cultivate that, and you battle it all the time, right? You battle working too much, or you battle not getting enough rest, or not recovering enough, or not training hard enough, or you miss a couple of days of training. But be okay with that and have a plan on how you're going to adjust as a result. So that's typically the routine. This morning, I woke up at about 5 a.m., did exactly what I told you I did, went out into my garage, foam roll. I have a great garage gym, foam rolled, and then put my earphones on, listened to some great, love Red Hot Chili Peppers, one of my favorite bands. So I put the Chili Peppers on, I did my run, watched my recovery, went upstairs, the girls were waking up. Either my wife or I make a very healthy breakfast. This morning it was some eggs, sourdough bread, which is, by the way, eat sourdough bread. It's one of the healthier breads you can eat because of the way it's fermented. So sourdough is also one of those cool. So we do a lot of sourdough bread, grass-fed butter, very natural, holistic, organic approach to how we live, grass-fed meat, organic vegetables. And then I usually get into my day. As a leader, I also don't schedule calls or meetings before 9:30. Because by the time I hit my office, it could be anywhere from 8 to 9-ish. And I want to look at my day. And I want to see because what happens...
Huge change. I just recently did that. And like nothing for me, I'm in 9, but I should do 9:30. Huge change.
Right. Well,
focus and clarity.
For what we do, to me, it's not. And I never look at work as 9 to 5 because
we're working all the time.
It's 5 to 9, but it's okay. Like I accept that. If you're willing to accept that, I told my leadership team the other day. I said, "You're putting pressure on yourself. Communicate to me how I can help you or how I can help you with your schedule, but you're making your choices to be busy or not, or how you schedule your day." And I think a lot of people are not that productive when they're working 9 to 5 because they haven't really looked at how to truly organize their time and have space in the day to recover from that, right?
Yep.
So typically I do calls from 9:30 to like 3 or 4. I try to make sure that I have at least 30 minutes or so for lunch, which is usually lunch, meaning working on myself. I'm reading science. I'm reading data all the time. I'm a data geek and a technology geek. So I'm looking at studies. I'm trying to learn more, which is something, again, I think everybody needs to do is learn all the time. That kind of keeps me fired up. I still have so much more to learn. The more I learn is like the less I find out I don't know as much, right?
Yeah.
So,
I find the less I know is more motivating than the oh my God, I don't know enough, or we're talking about the scheduling or how to manage your day and be productive. Like a lot of people think about that like, oh my God, this is such a burdensome topic. I need to figure out how to be more productive. I thought I'm already so busy, but actually I think it's like really inspiring and really motivating. Like how can I hack an extra 15 minutes out of my day, and what can I do in that 15 minutes? That's time given back to me, I think.
I think when people, you say, oh, I'm so busy. Doing what? You should choose to be productively engaged in something, not busy. Like you should, whatever you're doing as a leader, you should want to do it. If not, go find somebody to do it, or tell somebody, I don't want to do that. I'm not into that, right? And our leadership team knows that too, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's typical. And then typically if I'm doing a double session, I'll do another one in the evening. And then, for us, it's between 6 and 8. Is the founder of the company. He's we call him the mad scientist. He's going all the time. And we own our own factory in China as well. So we also have, something, I may be on a call at 7 o'clock with them, right? Which is fine.
Yeah, 5 to 9, man.
Yeah, for sure. But, and again, try to focus on, I think the nighttime ritual is really important for people, especially as leaders or those of your listeners out there that are multitasking. They got family, they got life. They're trying to be fit. They're trying to cultivate, themselves. I think that's really important, and you need, I think people underestimate the value of eating a really high quality, nutrient dense 80-20 meal. Because
80-20 meaning what?
I think 80% of your week you need to eat really clean, grass-fed meats, organic. I always say it's response eating. You should be eating in response to how hard you're training. If you're not training for 1 or 2 days, you eat less.
Right.
If you're training harder, you need more protein for the muscularity and the skeletal piece that we talked about earlier. Protein's massively important. So, but err on the side of eating a little bit less than you think at night, and you'll probably feel better the next day. And be careful of eating too close to bedtime, right? So one of the things, and it is for a lot of people issue. Because it's usually not out of, most people don't overeat because they're hungry. they overeat because they're self-medicating, or they're relaxed, or it's a way for them to...
It's completely subconscious. It's not, it has nothing to do with the need of the body. It has to do with, you're bored, or you're self-medicating, or you're avoiding, or what have you. So that's a whole nother... we'll have to have another podcast recording for that, that topic.
I gave you that great bottle of Buttonwood wine, by the way, as a congratulations for your podcast. My wife and I, we love good wine. I collect wine. So I have a huge wine locker, and I could drink it every night. Like, that's how much I enjoy it, but I don't.
Yeah.
And I'm careful, and I know when to shut it off. But I still can get the enjoyment out of it, right? Every sip is an enjoyment. Every bite of a great grass-fed filet mignon is a great experience. But I'm also mindful of what I'm doing, what my training continuum looks like during the week, and what I'm doing. Now, if I'm not training tomorrow, I don't have a busy morning, which is rare, then I might take a few additional liberties. There's your 20%. So that's when maybe on the weekend, we'll go to a nice breakfast, and I'll have some pancakes and some waffles, and my daughter Chloe loves pink donuts. So I'll go down to Surf and Donuts in Mission Viejo and get her and I'll have a chocolate donut. That's fine, right? I don't worry about that. And I think too many people stress out about what they're eating or what they're not eating. And I don't know about everybody out there, but I like eating, and I like dining, and I like to have good food, and it's enjoyable to me. But if I asked you, and we say this in our nutrition lectures, I say, well, I want everybody to go around the room and tell me, what is your vice? So tell me what your vice is. If you had think about
sugar.
So give me give me one or two things. What's a go-to for you?
Chocolate.
Chocolate. Like a chocolate,
cookies,
like chocolate bars.
Chocolate bars,
okay.
Yeah. And I can eat healthy chocolate bar, but like I can eat 2 bars, no problem. I can bang it out. Chocolate, cake, cookies, anything sweet, and I'm not a sugary candy guy, but a delicious cookie, like a warm chocolate chip, I could eat 4 of them, no problem.
And notice,
or donuts or things like that.
So everybody out there right now that's listening, I want you to think about, what are your vice foods, right? Everybody calls it a cheat. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's that one thing that you're like, oh man, for some people it might be a glass of wine, for some people it might be pizza, or maybe it's chips, or maybe it's cookies or pastries, so just think about that for a second. What is that? And most people, when they think about that, like you just did, you were smiling, you got a little animated.
What does it do for you?
You started thinking that was more. That had nothing to do with you being it brought you happiness, right?
That's right.
It helped yourself.
Yes.
And it should be.
Right.
That's okay. If you're training properly and everything else, you're going to Pac-Man through that and you're going to burn it off, right? However, if I said to you, whatever you identified as your vice food, eat that every day after lunch or dinner, you probably wouldn't. Over time, you'd be like, it doesn't have the same effect. You don't want it anymore, right? So understand why you're eating it, appreciate it while you're eating instead of gobbling it down, and I think you need that 20%. So that's the 80-20.
I don't keep that stuff at the house because I know that I would do it every day, every lunch. But if I go out or I'm at a party and there's a really special dessert that somebody orders, I don't mind experiencing that.
You should.
But if I have it at the house, it's almost like keep it away.
It drives me crazy if I'll go to a party or something, or I'll be somewhere and you got that person who's deconditioned, right? They're sitting at the table and the dessert comes around, they're like, no, I'm okay. I'm like, no, man.
No, enjoy it, baby.
So what's going on there, right? I'm thinking
avoidance,
and I'm like, yeah, you're in denial of it, right? So they're going to go home and do the same thing or whatever else, right? So I think to have some freedom with that,
I did
and take that weight off.
I did 75 hard maybe a quarter ago or whatever. And in 75 hard, no alcohol, no cheat meals, no sugar, right? Gallon of water, blah, blah, blah. And I will say that I don't know if I liked quite being that extreme. But it taught me a mental discipline in learning how to manage cravings and manage desire and manage, because we're very instinctual, we're very addictive types of personalities, high performers. And so I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's just, dig in, whatever. And to be able to control that temptation with a program was good for a while.
Right.
But then you have to learn how to clock it. You can't do it forever.
Well, and I think that's great. That's a good observation.
Yeah.
I think you have to be careful with going cold turkey or anything else, because your body's going to remember and
totally
it's going to get you. And again,
and I have a very extreme personality, very addictive. So it's like all on, all off, and it's not healthy. You have to learn how to stretch in between and make the conscious choice like you're talking about and be aware of the choice you're making.
Well, that's just it. So the awareness piece is critical. It's kind of, I think we all have a tendency to be either addictive, or we have a tendency to, really get a little bit overexcited about food or training or something. But then again, that's why I'm saying that it's that totality of that 4-pillar approach, because you could train really well. You could eat pretty well, eat 80-20 pretty well. But if you're sleeping 2 hours a night and you're a horrible spouse or friend, or you lack integrity, or you're not truthful, etc., those other things are going to suffer. And I think a lot of people need to take a little bit of inventory. And I do it every day, right? Like I am far from having those things nailed, but I'm trying to consciously get a little bit better on each one of those things, and find it lets me sleep better. And I think identify of those 4 quadrants, what are 1 or 2 things of each that you're really good at and you're really bad at, and start to work at those and whittle those away, right? And that's where you do your research, and that's where you do your discovery, and that's where you look at science and you look at your data. That's why we I'll share one last thing with you on that. When we first started doing all of our training and education, it was more about, we did very well with biomechanics and teaching physics and movement and programming for athletes, and the whole coaching and leadership development piece just really has really just blossomed. I mean, and that's what I'm excited about, right? It's looking at the totality of the
lifestyle,
the human being,
and
starting to take a look at that.
One last question as we wrap up. For you, what does it mean to be rich?
See, I knew you were going to ask this because I listened to some of your podcasts, which are very good, by the way. You've done a very nice job.
Appreciate it.
I think richness is about, how are you dealing with those 4 quadrants that I mentioned? Are you cultivating yourself? Are you finding an awareness of who you are as a human being? Meaning, what do I mean by that? Are you appreciating what you're doing? Are you really doing what you want to do? If you're not, you're the one making that choice. No one's making that choice for you to be in the job you're in, or be who you're with, or train how you're training. You decide. And I think when you start to be honest with some of that, you find a deeper richness, and it creates amazing awareness. And through that, you get a better sense of calm, right? And I still struggle with that all the time, because the schedules and the hectic, and how do you balance travel and want to get home before dinner. And like when I go out to Las Vegas,
life is life.
When I go out to Las Vegas, I've structured it appropriately. So I'm feeding everybody the way that I should, meaning I'll leave the house at 4:30. It gets me in the office by 8:30, 8:45. So I'm there all day. I'm meeting with my mad scientist founder well into the night and early in the morning. And then I'm driving home on the Thursday. I usually leave around 3 p.m. so that I'm at home to be with my girls at dinner, put them to bed. So I'm only away for 1 night, but I got 2 full days, big full days. And I generally do it Wednesday, Thursday, so I can mop up Friday what happened Wednesday, Thursday, and then tee up my week. And I think for leaders too is don't run into your week on a Monday not being prepared. You got to be prepared for the start of the week, because man,
what's your plan for the week?
If you're, and again, I like to look at things on a weekly basis, programming as well, business as well, because things change. The life is dynamic, and if you're not prepared for that, or you expect that not to happen, that's when the whole, the word stress to me, just I don't get it, because you bring on your own stress.
Yeah, you choose it.
You decide. Right. And, somebody said this to me in a meeting the other day. They said, why don't you, we never hear you get mad. You don't cuss. You don't yell. I'm like, I used to, long time ago. And then till all this stuff started clicking, now I'm kind of, you're the same person at work that you are at home, that you are.
Smooth.
Just be, man. And appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, look, man, I really appreciate you doing this. That was a really knowledge-packed episode. I've never talked that much about fitness and nutrition, so I really appreciate it. It's exactly why I wanted to have you on the podcast. So, love you, brother.
Likewise. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.